Welcome to our Ayurveda talk. What we're talking about tonight is how Ayurveda views hot yoga. I get asked this a lot, like, oh, so what does Ayurveda say about hot yoga? Well, everything is based on the elements. And I had something happen last week. I went to Trader Joe's and the guy at the register was really friendly. And he said, "Hey, what are you doing today?" And I said, "Well, I'm teaching a couple classes. I have a few clients." And he's like, "What do you teach?" And I said, "Yoga." And he said, "Oh, that's so great." And then he asked me what I do. And I said, Ayurveda. And he has a friend that does Ayurveda that's really into it. So we talked a little bit about that. And then he said, "What do you think of hot yoga since you do Ayurveda?" And I said, "Well, yoga is a treatment. Yoga is meant to be used to help bring each of the constitutions, doshas, into balance. So if you're dealing with an imbalance of certain elements, you want to help bring in a practice that's going to balance that. That's why I teach the way I teach. I teach dosha appropriate practices. When I work one-on-one with a client, I work with them based on their constitution and their dosha or whatever imbalances they're dealing with. The season matters, the time of the day matters, all of it matters. So he was asking me what I thought of hot yoga. And I said, well, it depends on the person. And the person that it's appropriate for is somebody like a kapha individual who has a lot of water and a lot of earth. Or it's springtime when we need a little bit more stimulation. Hot yoga would be appropriate. Why? Because in the spring, you're dealing with cold, moist, heavy elements. You're dealing with elements that have those qualities that make us feel heavy and lethargic. And so you want to stimulate, and heat does that. Movement does that. So hot yoga might be appropriate in the spring, and it might be appropriate for the kapha individual, depending upon what's going on with them. And it might even be appropriate for somebody who has a kapha imbalance. But then what I did tell him after that was, most of the people who are attracted to the hot yoga style of yoga are the people who shouldn't be doing it. And those are your pitta individuals who run hot and your vata individuals who have too much movement. And so it's very overstimulating for vata. Well, I told him that and he was like, yeah, that's really interesting. The gal at the register next to him said, well, I disagree. And I said, oh, all right. She said, I teach hot yoga. And I disagree with you. And I said, well, of course you disagree because you teach hot yoga, but you don't know what you don't know. So she got into this, like, really, her face turned beet red. She got all like kind of angry. And then I said to the guy, and I said, and that is why a pitta person, which is clearly what she is, doesn't do hot yoga. So actually, you really don't know what you don't know. That individual who thinks that hot yoga is good for her doesn't realize that it's actually overheating her. Look at her emotions that came up. They were heated emotions. She wanted to duke it out with me verbally. She wanted to duke it out with me. And I was like, well, I do Ayurveda, right? So I just care about what's going to bring somebody into balance. And if hot yoga does that, and honestly, I've done a lot of different styles of yoga. I started out with a teacher who had gone to India and learned from Pattabhi Jois and BKS Iyengar, which are opposite styles. But they both had their same teacher with Deskachar. And I ended up in the tradition of Deskachar. Deskachar's father was the teacher of Pattabhi Jois and BKS Iyengar. And so I ended up learning that tradition, which was the tantric tradition. And that is like a whole huge umbrella. The truth is, hot yoga, Bikram yoga is not even a tradition. Let's be honest. It's not a tradition. It is some guy, not a very good guy either, by the way. And there's a whole documentary on him, some guy who learned yoga, and we find out that he was a total shyster. He was like raping women and taking advantage of his position. So Bikram is not even a tradition. It's not even a style of yoga. And yet it's popular. So I get it. I understand why people like it. It's because of how it makes them feel. But there is a long-term result from that. There are consequences to everything we do. And if you do too much hot yoga, you can literally burn yourself out, deplete. You can deplete, especially if you run hot or you're dealing with vata. So that's it. I'm being my normal, typical self of being bluntly honest, but it's the truth. Nobody talks about it. It's the truth. All right. So you do have to be careful with hot yoga, especially in the summer, because people get overheated. So that's the deal. That is how Ayurveda looks at any type of heat therapy. It's not always appropriate. Even when we're doing the Panchakarma, the spring cleanse and the fall cleanse, Pitta people, the people with a lot of heat, they don't do heat therapy for very long. Much more limited compared to the Vata individual and the Kapha individual. So heat therapy, you got to be careful with it. Use it when it's appropriate. You don't use it when it's not appropriate. That's Ayurveda, bringing it all into balance. That's how we look at it. Okay, so that's our talk for tonight. Very interesting talk. And let's get started with our practice tonight, which is, by the way, not a hot yoga practice. We are actually doing a spring practice. That means a kapha reducing practice. So let's get started with that practice.